Perhaps you've heard tales of distant lands, of gentle magic, or of wandering spirits still drifting through someone's dreams. But there is a place unlike any other, where stories do not seek the storyteller, but the storyteller quietly waits for the stories to arrive. Tonight, I'll tell you one such tale. The stories from the apothecary beneath the mulberry tree. Beneath the wide-reaching branches of an ancient mulberry tree, its roots clawing deep into the mossy earth, stood a small apothecary made of weathered wood. Flickering oil lamps cast golden glows through its round windows, shaped like the eyes of a sleepy cat. The air was thick with the scent of dried herbs, peppermint leaves, and a trace of cinnamon that lingered like a forgotten spell. The shopkeeper was a young woman named Lyra, her eyes the color of warm tea, and her hair always pinned high. She wore a cloak of soft ash gray. No one remembered her full name, only that she had inherited the apothecary from an old healer who had vanished many winters ago. Lyra never locked the door. Rain or shine, day or night, the shop always remained slightly ajar, as if awaiting a guest even she had never met. Those who had passed through would whisper that the place sold more than medicine. It kept untold stories, unfinished dreams, and wandering spirits seeking a way home. And then, one early winter evening, a soft knock echoed on the wooden door. That was where the story truly began. The knock was barely a sound, more like the flutter of a moth's wing against wood. Yet in the stillness of the apothecary, it rang like a beckoning. Lyra opened the door. A breeze swept in, cold with the scent of wet leaves, moss, and metal. Before her stood a traveler in a long, deep blue cloak, and sewn along its hems were tiny wind chimes that tinkled gently with every movement, like whispers from the forest. The traveler said nothing, only bowed. Lyra stepped aside. The warmth of the shop wrapped around them both, and the nearest candle gave a soft flicker, as if listening. From beneath the cloak, the guest placed a small pouch on the counter. Inside was a sprig of silver-leafed grass. Not true silver, but the glint of frozen moonlight. "I need a draft to hold my dreams," said the traveler, voice gravelly and deep, like wind sifting through pine. Lyra nodded. As she began to crush the herb, blend the tinctures, and add a drop of oil from a bottle shaped like a sleeping cat, the traveler told her a tale of a village that had forgotten how to dream, where every dream vanished at the first light of dawn. The traveler settled into a creaky wooden chair by the hearth, the frost on their cloak slowly melting into the warmth. Their voice carried like a lullaby in the wind. The village lay at the forest's edge, wrapped in a fog that never lifted, not even in spring. At first, no one noticed. People still ate, worked, spoke, but slowly, the children stopped speaking of dreams upon waking. The adults, their sleep turned hollow, cold like stone. One night, I passed through. No lights in windows, no footsteps, not even the chirp of insects. Only the soft chime of my cloak as I walked the streets. At the innkeeper sat unmoving, eyes open but vacant, present in body but not in spirit. Something had been stolen from them. Not memory, not life, dreams. Lyra poured the mixture into a glass vial sealed with a cork carved like a crescent moon. "This is a draft to hold dreams," she said softly, placing it in the traveler's palm. "If even a single heart in the village still remembers warmth, it will begin again, a flicker first, then a flood." The traveler nodded. No thanks were spoken, only a second sprig of silver grass left on the counter, a token older than words. They vanished into the mist, their wind chimes singing a farewell that faded into silence. The door closed behind the traveler, leaving a shimmer of silver mist drifting in the air. Lyra stood still for a moment, her hand resting gently on the wooden counter, where the second sprig of silver grass remained, like a note from a dream she hadn't dreamt yet. She didn't usually accept gifts without words, but this one didn't need explanation. It wasn't payment. It was something left behind. Lyra returned to the fireplace, settling into the worn leather chair. The teacup on the table was still warm. She took a sip, then paused. A scent, faint as curling smoke, wafted through the room. It wasn't from the herbs, not from any vial she'd opened. It smelled like winter evenings in old villages, like untold stories, like dreams still waiting to be remembered. She said nothing, only smiled softly, her gaze drifting to the window where moonlight filtered through a fogged pane. Somehow, a part of the tale had stayed behind, not in the potion, not in the telling, but somewhere between the silences. After the scent of forgotten dreams faded from the apothecary, Lyra returned to her table of unlabeled jars. But no sooner had the moon made a full arc across the sky than footsteps echoed once more upon the stone path. Not the light tinkle of wind chimes this time, but the heavy, muddied thud of worn boots. A mail carrier stood there, their cloak tinged green with moss, clutching a weathered leather satchel with frayed seams. The cap on their head dripped with dew, as though they had come from a place long forgotten. They looked up, revealing eyes bright yet hollow, as if they'd seen things that never belonged to the surface world. "Lyra," the carrier whispered, voice rustling like old paper. "I have a letter from the bottom of a dry well." Lyra frowned. She had never heard of anyone sending letters from such a place. Yet she asked no questions, only stepped aside and let them in. The air in the shop grew still as the letter was unwrapped, a scroll tied with twine, soaked with the scent of rot, moss, and perhaps tears. "Someone's trapped down there," the mail carrier said. "Not their body, their memory." Lyra set the letter next to the tea kettle, eyes fixed on the trembling ink beginning to appear in the warmth. She had never brewed a remedy for a message, but tonight, it seemed, would be the first time. The letters on the scroll slowly emerged in the warmth from the teapot, curling like thin mist. They were not written in ordinary ink, but glimmered faintly, as though a forgotten memory had begun to breathe again. "I've been here so long," the letter wrote, "beneath stone and silence, where no voice reaches and light is only a memory of the sun. I don't remember who I am, but I recall laughter, a hand, and a field of violet blossoms in spring." Lyra traced a finger along the parchment. A chill ran through her. This wasn't just a letter. It was a voice. a fragment of a soul adrift, not yet faded, still reaching for the shore of remembrance. She rose, retrieving a small ceramic jar with a blue-painted lid. Inside was the powdered seed of the mind-calming bloom, used only to ease memories too painful or too ancient to bear. She ground the petals, mixed them with violet ink drawn from the dreaming tree's bark, and gently traced a single line down the scroll. A soft purple smoke rose, and for a moment the room trembled, not with sound, but with feeling. Yearning, solitude, a corner of time long buried now opening once more. The purple mist faded, and in the silence that followed, Lyra saw something she hadn't expected, but couldn't look away from. An image shimmered across the scroll, not quite a drawing, not quite words, but a memory. As if seen through clear dream water, a field of violet flowers under a twilight sky. A child ran through it, cloak fluttering, laughter as bright as wind chimes. Then the light changed, from gold to ash, from violet to pale green. The child stopped before an old moss-covered well, and then the image blurred. But just before it vanished, a voice echoed. Not from the paper, but from somewhere deeper in the room. "I've forgotten who my mother is." Lyra froze. Her heart skipped. The whisper carried no sound, only a feeling. A shard of love lost in time, reaching out for a way home. She paused, then moved to the shelf where her rarest tinctures waited. Not to heal, not to remember, but to connect. Some memories are not recalled by the mind, but touched only by the heart. Lyra lit a second candle and began preparing a remedy not written in any book. A potion to guide a lost voice back to the one who might still be listening. When the potion was complete, Lyra did not drink it. She didn't pour it into a flask or brush it onto the scroll. Instead, she placed the vial beside the letter and whispered an old charm, not to summon spirits, but to call forth memories with hearts. The second candle flared just slightly brighter, and the purple mist rose again, coiling gently until it formed a faint vision above the table. A quiet garden blooming with violets, and in it, a woman. She sat on a wooden bench, hands folded in her lap, eyes gazing into the distance. Not sad, not joyful, simply still, like the earth after rain. Petals drifted past her hands, and she didn't notice them. Yet in that softened air, a child's laughter suddenly rang out. The woman flinched, ever so slightly, but didn't turn her head. Only tilted it, as if someone had called her name from a place far away. Lyra watched the vision, as if it bloomed from within her own chest. She understood then. The woman had not lost a child, nor was she shackled by grief. She had simply forgotten she once dreamed of one. "Some dreams don't vanish," Lyra whispered. "They just wait to be remembered." Lyra sat still beside the scroll, its glow now faded, but the scent of violets lingered, and the echo of laughter still shimmered faintly in the air. She opened a worn drawer beneath the counter and retrieved a small hand mirror. Its glass was cracked, splintered like time. the only item she had kept from the old healer who once owned the shop. And the mirror, it never reflected faces as they were. As she brought it near the scroll, the shards began to glow, each reflecting not the candlelight, but a forgotten moment. One shard showed the child in the violet field, another the woman on the garden bench. A third held just a pair of hands held together beneath moonlight. Lyra understood. The bond was forming. Fragile as mist, but enough to create a path back. Yet the final step must come from a choice to remember. It cannot be forced. It cannot be borrowed. She set the mirror down, sealed the prepared potion, and wrapped both in a soft linen cloth. Then she turned to the mail carrier still waiting silently by the window. "Can you take this back to where the letter came from?" The mail carrier nodded. No questions asked, no details needed. They took the bundle with both hands, bowed slightly, and stepped out into the mist, their footsteps tracing the first lines of a dream just beginning to remember itself. By the time the moon reached its peak, the mist around the apothecary had thickened, colder now, as if bracing for something approaching. Lyra had returned to her warm cup of tea, thinking the night would end in silence. But then, a soft thunk outside. Not a knock, but the dull sound of wood meeting stone. She rose and opened the door. Before the shop stood a figure in a cloak the color of swan's down, their face hidden beneath a wide hood. They had not come from the forest or along the trail, but from the direction of the lake. The traveler said nothing at first, only held up a small lantern shaped like a curled leaf, glowing with a light like captured moonshine. "Do you have a remedy?" they whispered. "For one who does not belong here?" Lyra invited them in. As the door closed behind, a single drop of lake water slid from the hem of the traveler's cloak and hit the stone floor, releasing a faint wisp of vapor, like a sigh too old to speak. "I was once part of this world," the guest said. "But since I crossed the lake, I can no longer dream. I can't hear the insects. I can't smell the earth after rain. Everything is blurred." Lyra listened, not with her ears, but with the stillness within. She opened an old leather-bound book, turning to a page inked in water script. It held the only recipe for those who had stepped across the threshold. Not quite death, but not truly life either. From her shelves, she gathered a dried drop of dew, a petal of night-breath bloom, and a shard of mirror moon. When the mix simmered over blue fire, its scent rose like the tears of the lake, cold, clear, full of nameless memory. The guest gazed at the finished draft but did not reach for it. They bowed deeply. "If I return to the other shore, will I carry anything with me?" Lyra gave no answer, but her eyes were calm, still as the lake at dawn. "If you carry even one light inside you, the water will not keep you." The apothecary held its breath, filled only with the soft ticking of the kettle and the gentle glow of the leaf-shaped lantern. The traveler stood just where they had entered, hands hidden in wide sleeves, waiting for something still forming. Lyra took the finished vial and walked slowly toward them. She didn't hand it over. but placed it gently on the wooden counter between them. The light inside had changed. No longer silver, but shimmering like sunlight through deep water. The kind of light you only see when you're sinking, but still reaching for the surface. "This draft won't bring you back," Lyra said softly. "It will only help you remember why you wanted to return." The traveler slowly extended a hand, for the first time, revealing skin pale and wrinkled, as if soaked in water far too long. But as their fingers touched the vial, something strange occurred. The light flowed downward, as if the potion were listening. "I used to be a lamp maker," they murmured. "I lit paths around the lake for the lost. Until one night, I wondered if anyone would ever light a lamp for me. So I stepped onto the boat." Lyra didn't ask further. She simply placed her hand atop theirs, just for a moment. And then the traveler turned to go. As the door opened, the mist from the lake had thinned. And this time, each footprint they left behind didn't vanish right away. They caught the light, just barely, like a glow held quietly in the palm of a hand. After the lake guest departed, the apothecary fell into a strange quiet. Lyra didn't make tea. She only sat still, turning pages of a blank book, listening to the whisper of parchment like an old breath. Then, a faint click echoed from the far corner. The shelf where she kept things not for sale, not medicine, not quite memory either. She rose. On the shelf, an old rosewood music box, long untouched, had opened by itself. No one had gone near it, but the lid stood ajar, and inside, instead of the usual melody or spinning dancer, lay a single white feather, delicate, weightless, dustless. She didn't recall placing it there. In her memory, there had once been a ballerina who spun on the wooden stage, but the dancer had vanished long ago without notice. Lyra lifted the feather. The air shifted slightly, as though someone had just passed behind her. A chill touched her nape. Then, a whisper, close and soft. "I no longer know if I was the bird or the wind." She turned. No one was there, but on the table now lay a sea blue handkerchief embroidered with a spiral. Lyra understood. This visitor hadn't knocked, hadn't asked for medicine. They had left only a trace. And perhaps this time, she was the one meant to continue the tale. She placed the feather into a bowl of rainwater. Instead of sinking, it lifted, tracing a shining arc around the room before dissolving into glowing letters. If the wind remembers, is it still the wind? Lyra sat back, her hand resting beside the now still bowl. And for the first time in many years, she reached for pen and paper, not to prescribe, not to record, but to write a letter, not to anyone in particular, just to let the wind carry it away. No one else came that night. After the feather dissolved into light and faded away, the apothecary settled into a silence that wasn't quite night, but more like the pause between two long breaths. Lyra didn't tidy anything. She simply lit another candle and placed it near the window. The wind outside had quieted. The forest no longer rustled. The branches of the old mulberry tree stood still, as if eavesdropping on someone's thoughts. On the table, the letter she had begun still lay unfinished. The violet ink had dried mid-line, and the handwriting leaned as though pausing to listen to something far away. Lyra held her quill but did not write further. She only looked out, where moonlight tangled in the branches like memories waiting to be named. In that moment, no herbs burned, no elixirs brewed, and no knocking broke the air. Only the apothecary and its keeper, thinking of dreams others had forgotten and stories yet to be told. Perhaps no one else would come tonight. But that didn't make her sad, for sometimes waiting itself is a kind of answer, quiet, gentle, and without a name. Spring came slowly to the ancient forest. Only when the last winter breeze melted into jasmine and fresh grass did Lyra realize how many nights had passed since anyone had knocked on the door. That afternoon, as sunlight filtered shyly through the canopy and the first moths of the season began to appear, oddly early, a visitor arrived. Clad in unbleached linen robes, they carried a silk-lined basket on their back. Without a word, they opened it. Inside were golden cocoons, each a different shape, and some of them whispered. "They refuse to hatch," the visitor said, their voice steady as thread through cloth. "They carry the wrong dreams." Lyra peered into the basket, at first skeptical, then she heard it. A faint breath from within one cocoon, not a breath of life, but of something unfinished, waiting to become. "What do you want?" she asked. "Just mend their proper dreams," they answered. "So when they hatch, they know who they are." Lyra lifted each cocoon, placing them gently on a soft cloth and holding them up to candlelight. Through the silk, faint images glowed. One held a rainstorm, another a musical note, and one was completely empty. She began to mix, not medicine, but dyes for dreams, each color drawn from the ink of a different moonlit night. One by one, the cocoons passed through the tinting process, as if trying on memories, as if learning to recognize their names. The visitor sat silently, eyes watchful behind their veil. When the final cocoon was returned to the basket, Lyra said nothing. She simply tied the lid with a single red thread. The guest bowed. If they fly by again, perhaps they'll leave the right dream behind. Then they departed, soft as silk brushing the doorframe, leaving behind a single thread on the wooden handle, still quivering long after the breeze had gone. A few nights passed with no visitors, but one object was left at the apothecary door, wrapped in coarse cloth, tied with twine like a gift from the sea. No knock, no footprints on the step. Only a salty mist lingering in the air, like the sigh of a wave that had just receded. Lyra opened the bundle and found a seashell split in two. The outside dulled and weathered like old stone, but the inside still held a faint turquoise glow, like moonlight pooled in the ocean's depth. And from deep within the shell, she heard a voice. Not clear, not words, but a cadence like a song whose lyrics had been forgotten. When held to her ear, she heard water brushing against stone, and between the tides, a faint whisper. I spoke something once, and the sea kept it. Lyra sat down and placed the halves on the table, trying to fit them together. But the break was too sharp, no longer seamless. Still, the light inside grew, as if the voice refused to fall silent. She turned to her oldest book, recipes not meant to heal the body, but to recall words lost to the tide. Crushed coral dust, dew's tear, and a drop of oil from the shellwood tree. Lyra blended them into a special balm and laid one glowing drop along the crack. Each droplet shimmered like starlight sinking into ocean depths. When the shell rejoined, imperfect but whole, the voice inside was clearer. This time, it spoke a full sentence. If someone hears this, tell them I never truly left. Lyra took a small slip of paper, wrote down the exact words, and folded it gently into the same cloth bundle. She didn't know who might come to claim it. Perhaps one who once lived among waves, or someone listening from a place no longer named, but she kept the promise to speak what had once been kept. It was a soft, rainy afternoon when the door of the apothecary opened with a faint chime, but Lyra couldn't recall hearing a knock. A person stood in the doorway. Their clothing was unremarkable. An old wool coat, a weathered satchel, mud-streaked boots. But their eyes were empty, like someone who had just awoken from a dream they couldn't place. I think I've been here before, the guest said, unsure. But I can't remember why. Lyra nodded, inviting them in as she always did. They sat down and placed the satchel on the table, opening it to reveal only a small notebook, its corners torn and a pen missing its cap. I keep a journal, they said, but one page is missing, and I feel like that page is the reason I came. Lyra flipped through the notebook and noticed the spine had been carefully sliced, a page deliberately removed. On the next page, a line was scrawled, "When I forget enough, I'll return." A memory erased on purpose, as if they had chosen to lose something, only to find it again when ready. From her shelf, Lyra took a small vial filled with paper fragments preserved by a special tincture. Paper burned, not lost, but rewritten in the memories of others. She dropped a few pieces into a bowl of clear water, then whispered, "If it's meant to return, it will rewrite itself." Slowly, the water tinted violet, and across its surface, words began to form. Lyra, I was once the one who showed the way. The guest sat silently for a long time. Then they smiled, just slightly. I think I can go on now. No questions, no requests. They simply closed the journal, bowed, and left. As Lyra watched from the doorway, their figure moved down the rain-damp path and for the first time left a shadow behind. After the guest departed, leaving behind the first shadowed footprints, Lyra didn't return to her table. Something in their final words, the one who showed the way, stirred a faint thread within her. She stood still for a long time. Then, almost instinctively, she walked to the far corner of the apothecary, where a small door led down into the cellar. a place she rarely visited, only when searching for things long forgotten. The wooden stairs creaked underfoot. The air below was cold, tinged with the scent of old fabric and damp stone. Lyra lit the wall lantern. Its flickering glow cast long shadows over dusty shelves, and there, among them, was an unfamiliar object, a hand lantern of tarnished brass, the kind once used to guide paths through fog, its glass etched with spirals. She leaned closer. Beneath the lantern lay a thin slip of paper, its writing nearly gone. But held near the flame, the last line glimmered. "If I forget even the light, bring this lantern when I return." Lyra's chest tightened, not from memory, but from recognition. That guest had once worked these woods, guiding the lost, and long ago had guided her. She recalled a night of deep fog when young Lyra had wandered down a shimmering trail. A yellow lantern had appeared. No words, no names, just an outstretched hand. Since then, she'd never been lost again. She gently brushed dust from the lantern. Its glow brightened slightly, as if it too remembered being seen again. She didn't need to bring it out this time, but she would keep it close, because sometimes even the ones who guide others need to know they were once a light in someone's dark. The next morning, with mist still clinging to the windows, Lyra sat alone at her wooden table. The old brass lantern rested in front of her, now clean and carefully placed. She meant to carry it upstairs, to store it among her cherished keepsakes. But something held her hand. A quiet sensation, as if the lantern had not yet finished speaking. She looked up, and her gaze drifted, almost absent-mindedly, to the small circular mirror hanging in the corner, the one she usually used to check the color of tinctures. But today, the mirror did not reflect her. It reflected the lantern's light, and within that glow, she saw a child standing in the forest, holding a lamp, guiding an adult through the mist. Lyra frowned. She moved closer. The image in the mirror rippled like water. The child walked ahead, lantern steady, and when the adult turned to thank their guide, there was no one there, only the lamp, still warm in their hand. She touched the mirror. It was cold. And then she understood. The lantern bearer that night wasn't the one guiding her. She had been the guide. As a child, instinctively, unknowingly, she had lit the way for someone else. Perhaps that moment was what led them to become the guide later. Perhaps that was when they chose to stay in the forest, to carry the light. She had never remembered it, because she never thought the light was hers. Lyra returned to the table. She didn't store the lantern away. She placed it on the highest shelf beside the door, because sometimes the one who carries the light doesn't need to know what they're illuminating, only that someone, somewhere, found their way home. That morning, Lyra rose earlier than usual. The sky was still dim, but the mist had begun to retreat into the woods, like a door slowly opening. She hadn't planned to go outside, but when she saw the soft glow of the old brass lantern by the door, the same faint light she'd left there the night before, she felt something calling. Not far from the apothecary, Along a small forest path that twisted between ancient roots, she came upon an unexpected sight. A blue ribbon tied gently around a low branch, and at the base of the tree, where the first morning light touched the moss, sat another hand lantern. Weathered, dulled, as if it had seen many nights. Beside the lantern lay a folded note. Simple, untouched by time. She opened it, and the words within tightened something in her chest. Long ago, a little girl never asked my name, but I've carried her light ever since. No name, none needed. She looked into the woods. No one was there. But the birds were waking, the leaves whispered, and something in the air exhaled with quiet resolution. Lyra knelt, lifting the old lantern. Not to take it home, but to light it again, setting it on a branch, right where it had lain. The yellow glow flickered, not bright, but warm. Then she turned back. No footprints would mark her path, but the dreams in the forest would know. The keeper of the light was still here. The days that followed passed like tea cooling in a cup, slow, warm, unhurried. No new visitors. No strange gifts left at the door. Only morning light filtering through the round window, mint leaves rustling in the breeze, and the ticking of the old pendulum clock, a story that never quite stopped speaking. Lyra did not wait. But every twilight, she still lit a lantern and placed it near the door, as if the apothecary wasn't just a place of healing, but a pause along the path between forgotten dreams. On her table, several notebooks remained unfinished. Some held recipes, others scattered fragments, memories from others, thoughts of her own. She didn't mark dates, no page numbers, because here, things didn't begin or end. They simply drifted. Some evenings, Lyra would brew herself a cup of tea and sit by the window, listening to the wind retell stories she had never heard. Sometimes there would be a knock, soft as a moth's wing. Perhaps someone who had lost their way. Perhaps a dream looking to remember its name. And sometimes nothing would happen at all. But the door always stayed slightly ajar. And that was enough.